Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We have a special guest with us today for our 1 hour AppSec video. I'd like you to meet Selim. Now, one of the things we're trying to do in 1 hour AppSec is demystify the world of application security, and that means also understanding some of the other people and other roles that are out there. So I've invited the lovely Selim here to share his world as a vulnerability researcher. So welcome.
Thank you, Laura.
So for the benefits of those who are joining us for this short video today, who are you and what is it you do?
Thank you, Laura, again. So my name is Selim Enes Karaduman. I'm 20 years old. And now I have been doing vulnerability research basically from high school, basically 4 years.
Wow.
As an independent researcher for 3 years. But now I work at a mobile hacking lab as a vulnerability researcher.
Awesome. Well, firstly, kudos. Most of us at the end of high school were not quite that motivated, so that's amazing. Selim, this is an area that we don't know much about. You know, when we see the word vulnerability researcher, we imagine that you sit in a basement in a HUD and hack things. We have no idea what that means. Can you share with us what it means to be a vulnerability researcher and what are the typical things that you're doing when you look for vulnerabilities?
Of course, sure. The vulnerability researcher actually, basically, it's like a difference between pen testing and bug bounty. For example, when actually in the end, all security researchers, many of them look for vulnerabilities in a product, software. But when it comes to vulnerability research specifically, they focus on high impact vulnerabilities and even functionally exploit them. For example, for web applications, for many know, there are a lot of vulnerability classes. And for example, one of them is XSS, is a vulnerability. It may have impact, but in the end, what vulnerability research in general look for is more critical vulnerabilities that leads to system compromise. Like in the end, remote code execution is the main goal of a vulnerability researcher many times for web applications, for example, by using different kind of vulnerabilities, for example, SSRF, SQL injections, and different type of vulnerabilities, even combining them to find most impactful vulnerability in a situation, and even exploit them to show people or security companies or clients for security purposes. But also, this is not limited with web applications. This could be operation systems like Windows, Linux, iOS. And in these softwares, generally what vulnerability researchers look for are still high impact vulnerabilities, even remote code execution, but also privilege escalations. Like all jailbreaks are done by this way. So they basically go from low privileged user to root. This is the main goal of vulnerability researcher. So it depends on what kind of program software you are targeting.
Awesome. So if I was to summarize then, what we've got here is, so in our program in 1 hour AppSec, we've learned about severity and that some things aren't that serious and some things can be critical. And this is taking those vulnerabilities from the theoretical to being, can I use them together to really get that end result in a system such as remote code execution? Fantastic. So what kind of tools and things do you use to find these and to do your engineering workflow?
Definitely, there are different types actually vulnerability research process. The whole vulnerability research process is followed by exploitation process. This is basically two big steps: vulnerability research and exploitation. It's the base for vulnerability research, for finding that critical bug that can really lead to system compromise, which we use static analysis and dynamic analysis. Static analysis is basically source code review. The researcher knows the patterns of vulnerabilities and look for in the code. And the second, dynamic analysis, could be basically there are some techniques, for example, called fuzzing or automatic scanners or different kind of tools in general, more automation stuff. But still, they require so much engineering and expertise, etc.
Awesome. So, looking at this, I'm a software engineer and a security person. So this is quite familiar to me, right?
Sure.
Source code review we do as engineers, but you're doing it with a different mindset.
Mindset, definitely.
Absolutely. And then the automated tools, those are things that we could also, as engineers, have a look at and understand more. So that's really interesting. So when it comes to the exploitation phase, what kind of tools are you using then?
Well, general debugging tools or reverse engineering tools, this really depends on the application. For example, if I have expertise in Linux kernel and Android kernel, which I'm working on every day, and we of course need to use some debuggers to debug the kernel, to all that's millions of C codes, which you can use different kind of debuggers, GDB and LLDB and other stuff. These are most useful tools. Also for reverse engineering, the binaries, you can use IDA, GIDRA, and the binary engine. There are a lot of tools to be helpful for the researcher.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, look, this has been a really great introduction, Selim. I've been really grateful for your time here today.
Thank
If
you.
our audience wanted to learn a bit more about being a vulnerability researcher, are there any resources you would recommend them looking at?
Definitely. What I think is that if you are a software engineer and understand how application or software works, that's the big step actually. Because in vulnerability research, you first need to understand how that your target application software works in the first place, later on security of it. If you don't understand how it works, it's going to be very hard for you to produce results in terms of vulnerability research and exploitation.
I love this because what it makes me realize that because, you know, as a software engineer, this is what we do. We build systems, we understand them. It's the same skill set that you're using, just with a few extra steps and a bit of an extra experience on top. So for those who are watching who are software engineers, have a think about this. You know, if you were to put yourselves in a vulnerabilities researcher's shoes, how would you see your application and how would your knowledge of how it works help you? Thank you so much for your time today, Selim. That's been really, really helpful to me and the whole audience.